Evening, everybody. Just before we start the formality of the meeting, can I thank all members of the Planning Committee and our officers for the contributions you've made to the review that's being currently undertaken into the workings of the Planning Committee. I've, together with our co-chair and vice-chair, we've had a look at all the responses in conjunction with Helen Mitchell, and they're very, very informative. So thank you for that. Helen is currently digesting that and looking at some of the issues which were raised by those comments, and is going to produce a report for us to see in the fairly near future. So thank you for that. Right, welcome everyone to this meeting of Derbyshire Dale's District Council's Planning Committee, held here in the Town Hall in Matlock on Tuesday, 20th of February. Just the normal matters of protocol. We've no fire alarm programme for this evening, so if you do hear the alarm, please make your way as quickly as possible out through the double doors, down the stairs and out into the courtyard. For our guests this evening, the proceedings are are transmitted live by the camera over in the corner there. If you don't want to appear on the film, please just wave to me, and I'll make sure that the camera is turned away at that particular moment. Have I missed anything out? Right. Well, we do have one additional agenda item, the content of which has been circulated to members just now. I'll take that right at the end of the meeting, if everyone's okay with that. It won't delay us for more than a few minutes, I think, but it is an important additional item. Right. Our first item this evening is apologies for... I need to introduce everyone first at the top here. I'm chairing the meeting this evening. I'm Councillor Peter O'Brien. I'm assisted by our Vice Chair, Councillor Burfoot. We have planning officers, our Development Manager, Chris Whitmore, and one of his colleagues, Gina. To my left, we have Tommy and Angela at the back there from our committee services, who make sure everything's in order and record everything accurately. And we have Kerry, who is our legal services manager, who advises on matters of planning, law and procedure. Right, back to the agenda. Our first item, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We got apologies from Councillor Buttle, Councillor Hughes, and Councillor Franks is substituting for Councillor Hughes.
Item 2 is approval of our minutes from the meeting held on the 16th of January 2024.
Move them, Chair.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Archer. All those in favour? Anyone against? And anyone who wasn't here who wants to abstain? So we have 2 abstentions. So that is carried. Thank you for that. Item 3 is any interests members need to be declared at this stage, please. Any interests? No, that's good. We'll move on to the 4 applications we have for determination this evening. The first one is in Wirksworth, in Dale End of Wirksworth, which is a resubmission of a previous application for solar panels on the roofs of the old Blacksmith Shop in Wirksworth. One of my guests here this evening is rather hard of hearing, so has asked me if we could all of us please take extra care and speak as clearly as possible and into the microphone. We have 4 speakers for this application. The first one is Mr. Paul Carr, who is a local resident, who's going to speak in favour of the application. Mr. Carr, you've got to have 3 minutes, please.
Sorry, could you just put your microphone on?
There we go. That's better. Okay, so my name is Paul Carr, and I'm talking to you tonight as a resident of Wirksworth, and I'm very much here to support the applicant. And I do so not just as a fellow resident of Wirksworth, but also as a fellow business owner, who, like Chris, has tried over the years to add to the cultural and economic life of our town. So my business is the Northern Lights Cinema, and it's similarly located within the conservation area on North End. And I too wanted to install photovoltaic panels to do my bit to help with the climate emergency, as well as reduce the running costs of the cinema. So in 2019, we successfully installed a series of 42 photovoltaic panels on our roof, having been advised by the planning department that, provided the solar panels do not protrude more than 0.2 meters off the plane of the roof slope and do not come within 1 meters of the eaves, ridge or sides of the roof, you will be able to attach solar panels to the roof of the building as permitted development. So there was no planning, no committee for 42 photovoltaic panels. So we invested £14,000 on our PVs as well as internal batteries, and we had an expected return on investment of 15 years at that time. And this is relevant because, as it happens, with the recent increase of energy costs and also with feed-in tariffs, we're on track to achieve return on investment this year. That's within 5 years from installation. In fact, the photovoltaics now supply 30% of the cinema's energy consumption, saving thousands of pounds each year and safeguarding employment and marketing. So this is far from a small contribution towards reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, as used as a justification to refuse this application. Just as I'm sure that the council will be hoping for more than a small contribution for the approved installation of PVs to Matlock's Arc and Wirksworth's leisure centres, with a substantial investment of public funds. So the cinema installation is also relevant because at least 6 of the panels are very clearly visible from the public highway. And when I say the public highway, I mean the road and the pavement of North End, not just from a permit holder only car park, as is the case with Mr. Tebb's application. So we're proud that as a local business, we're able to invest in renewables, and we're supported in doing so by both our town and our district councils. It sends a positive message to our customers, our neighbours, and our wider community that we can all take steps to help fight against the climate emergency we all face. So I hope tonight you'll send the same positive message and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garth. I think you'll hear in a few moments why this particular application requires planning consent, whereas yours didn't. Our next speaker is Councillor Lucy Peacock, who is one of the ward members. As a ward member, Lucy, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I won't take 5 minutes. I know how long the meetings are. As you all know, we are in a climate crisis. Now, the council understands this. We've put it at the heart of the new corporate plan, and it's also in quite a few of our existing policies from previously, specifically PD7. We also have policies on heritage assets, and I want to talk about the fact that sometimes they conflict, as they have done in this application. And I think it seems to me that too often the heritage policies take precedence over the climate change policies, and I think that's the wrong way round. I know we have a statutory duty to preserve heritage assets, and that's perfectly correct. But in this particular case, the heritage asset is being preserved. The panels go over the roof, and they are removable. I mean, they're not like take them down straight away removable, but they are removable. the application doesn't damage the heritage asset, it is preserved. The application will have a small effect on the landscape from very specific viewpoints, specifically that small car park that isn't even, it's not a visitor car park. But the impact on climate change taken along with any other applications for solar panels in the heritage, in the conservation area, and most of Wirksworth is a conservation area. I think if we're going to turn down all applications just because they're in a conservation area, I think that's sending the wrong message. We want to send the message that we care about the climate crisis. And lastly, I just want to point out, it says it in the report, Wirksworth Town Council have said, they have unanimously agreed that a building's impact on the environment should be of greater importance than the impact on the streetscape. It's not, it's something that they believe in very strongly, and I agree with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Our next speaker is Ms. Mary Ann Hooper, who is a local resident but also Chair of Wirksworth Community Land Trust. You also have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. I'm supporting the application being considered here. For the past 30 years, I've been an active campaigner about the climate emergency. In 2016, I helped set up the Wirksworth Community Land Trust, and I'm currently the chair. The recommendation to refuse approval says, the installation would harm the character and appearance of the conservation area, which would not be outweighed by the limited public benefits arising. The recommendation does not take account of the revised planning policies framework nationally that was published in December 2023. The Department of Levelling Up, etc., says, this revised framework includes for the first time a new policy setting out that local planning authorities should give significant weight to the need to support energy efficiency to existing buildings. And it provides greater clarity to local planning authorities about the balance between protecting conservation areas and climate change and energy efficiency. That does not reflect the assumption in the application of limited public benefits. In a recent document on reviewing the barriers to rolling out the new policies, the dire state of local authorities is also mentioned. Workloads are increasing, staff have decreased, especially conservation specialists. It's not surprising that those staff might feel so strongly about protecting heritage first and foremost. But I quote from a later section in the document about barriers, quote, planners should adopt an approach of co-designing solutions rather than standing back and waiting for applications likely to be refused. I think that good idea may be too optimistic for overworked staff, but I agree it should be the aim. Climate scientists have made it clear we face a grave threat to all life on Earth, including us. I believe solar panel installations, and it's been shown over numerous times, can be designed to blend well on slate roofs and provide minimal harm to the marvelous roofscape of our conservation area. And if we don't make some compromises, no one will be around to enjoy that historic legacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hooper. And finally, we have Mr. Chris Tabb, who is the applicant. Mr. Tebb, as applicant, you have 5 minutes to address us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Both Derbyshire Dales District Council and Wirksworth Town Council declared a climate emergency over 4 years ago. I've been watching a recording from this council of a very similar case regarding solar panels on the roof of a listed property overlooking the main marketplace in Wirksworth from 2021. This committee voted then to overturn the planning officer's decision, noting that urgent actions required to tackle climate change should take precedence over decisions that prioritise the visual character of a roof. Despite our best efforts to present an acceptable design with non-reflective uniform panels, low-profile mounting and colour-matched brackets, the planning department have recommended to refuse the installation on the old Blacksmith Shop, an unlisted but beautiful commercial building at the bottom of the Dale. Rooftop solar installations are visible from the main roads and public spaces of Wirksworth. They exist on listing buildings overlooking the marketplace, the view up North End, houses visible from the Dale, Green Hill and Bowling Green Lane, and on many other properties in all areas of the town. 3 years after this committee overturned a planning decision very similar to this, the planning department is still preventing residents and businesses from installing renewable energy on the basis that it would harm the character and appearance of the host building, and that the harm would not be outweighed by the public benefit arising from the proposal. To this applicant, this position appears to read that there is so much work required to tackle climate change that individual contributions are futile and unwelcome. The planning policy that roofscape appearance is more important than measures to tackle what appears to be a rapidly escalating climate crisis must change if we are to make any progress. Preventing households and businesses from investing their own money to make an individual contribution is leaving people who understand the urgency of the climate crisis powerless to effect change. If an individual chooses to invest in implementing proven methods of reducing global warming, the county council should not stand in their way because it would alter the appearance of a roof. This application has the backing of the Wirksworth Town Council, the Wirksworth Community Land Trust, Grassroots Wirksworth, and many of the local residents, over 130 of whom have signed a petition I started only a week ago. I hope that with the backing of this committee, we can overturn this planning decision and in doing so, add to a body of evidence that will enable others in the town to follow suit and invest in renewables themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tebb. Before we turn to the officer's presentation, can I just draw your attention to the fact that we have 5 further comments from the public on our papers in front of us, all of them in support of the application. Just take a moment or two to peruse those. Okay, Gina is going to introduce this item, and I've asked her first to explain for the benefit of members precisely what is meant by an Article 4 direction and how it's applicable to this property in this particular application. Gina.
Hello. So an Article 4 direction is a direction made by the local planning authority. In the case of conservation areas, although conservation area does afford you some protection in terms of permitted development rights, it doesn't afford protection from certain levels of permitted development. So in Wirksworth, because of the sort of high volume, it being a conservation area and the high volume of historic properties, and there is Article 4 directions on a number of properties in Wirksworth, including this one. So the Article 4 restricts permitted development rights without the requirement of a planning application to allow the planning authority to look at planning applications and review applications of their own merit. So, but you can also have Article 4 directions to control permitted changes of use. But in terms of Wirksworth, it's just to in relation to domestic alterations or commercial alterations such as solar panels or changes to windows and things like that. So this application is a resubmission of a previous application, and it's for 11 solar panels to the roof of the old blacksmith shop. So we have recommended the application for refusal based on the impact of the development on the character and appearance of the property, which is subject to the Article 4 direction, which does mention roofscapes in it, and also the impact on the wider appearance of the Wirksworth conservation area, and then also ecological impact of the development as well. So a late comment came in from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust asking for some more details about potential impact on protected species, which has been fed into the report as well. So say if you've got any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Yes, it's now question time. Can I just remind everyone it's one set of questions and no more than three questions. No more than three questions in that time. Councillor Whitehead first, please.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to say what excellent public representations that we've had tonight. Really clear, precise. My question, two questions, both on the reason for refusal. How does precedent come into this? Because I go to Wirksworth multiple times a week. There are a lot, as described by some of the public comments. There are a lot of solar panels throughout Wirksworth. So I just wonder where precedent comes in when we've already got them, and why we'd refuse this particular one. And then the second one is the public benefit, because I agree with one of the speakers. Is our focus so narrow that we only perceive the public benefit to the individual? Surely if we all put solar panels on our houses and we all bought into renewable energy, the benefit is much wider than the individual or the individual property. The benefit is to our whole society. So I just wonder why we don't factor that into our deliberations when we make a decision.
I'll take that question, Councillor Whitehead. Thank you for the two elements to that question. In terms of precedent, I think there's a distinction to be drawn here between exercising permitted development. So as an authority in the right location, we are supportive of microgeneration generally. In this particular instance, we're dealing with a heritage asset, and we're required by law to have special regard to the special character and appearance of conservation areas. So it's actually set out in statutes in the Act, the 1990 Listed Building and Conservation Area Act. So we have to have regard to that. We can't just set that aside. A national policy, whilst it's supportive of microgeneration in the right locations, there's also a whole chapter on heritage in national policy. And government policy is very much geared towards protection of heritage. And the judgment we have to make as officers is that where we identify less than substantial harm, which is where we're at here, we have to consider the public benefit and whether that public benefit outweighs the harm. It's very difficult with private installations which only provide renewable energy for the householder or the commercial property, whatever it might be. And in a planning balance, it's a modest public benefit. In officers' view, we don't consider that's outweighed in this particular case, hence why we're recommending refusal of the application. So we've come to that conclusion on that basis.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. First question, Chris, is Article 4. What was the date when it was introduced, please? Give me the date when it was introduced.
It has been reviewed, the Article 4 direction.
I mean, originally, when they first introduced Article 4. Can you give me the date of it?
The Wirksworth was 1992 and reviewed in 2014.
I believe it's going back 40 years, if not more.
Yeah, so I've been told that in 1992 originally, and then it was reviewed in 2014 because obviously things move on, technologies move on, solar panels become more prevalent, and in recognition that the historic environment in Wirksworth is particularly precious and important, obviously solar panels were introduced in that later review of the Article 4 direction.
Yeah, I estimate it was about probably back in the 70s, 60s, but because I remember at the time it was introduced. My second question is, North End, the cinema, that was not opposed by the planning officers at that time. And that's probably in an Article 4 area too. It's a conservation area anyway.
Yeah, the Speaker, in a conservation area, you wouldn't normally need planning permission. I think that the Speaker very eloquently set out the position there that they exercise permitted development. So they carried out the development as permitted development. We had no control over that installation in that particular case.
So, okay, thank you.
Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, the cinema one, so that wasn't covered by the Directive 4.1, that's correct, yeah?
No, it was just
okay.
conservation area.
Great,
yeah.
thanks. So just to cover, just one question or two in one, really. So I think looking at the recommendations for refusal, if I'm correct from my experience of working on this committee, the first one about the damage and the harm and the benefit is very much something we can weigh up. So we could have a disagreement over how much weight we place on each of those. The harm and benefit wouldn't be an issue in terms of planning law if we were to take a different view on that. And that's my first question. Am I right in interpreting that part of the recommendation? It is something we can have a disagreement on in terms of weight of harm and benefit. Then the second one, if we did decide as a committee that we will place more weight on the benefit than the harm, then I move on to the second reason for refusal about the protected species, which is perhaps a bit trickier. What would need to be done if we were minded to go against officer recommendation based on the weight and the harm and benefit, but then we've still got the additional issue of the protected species. Is there a way around that protected species issue?
Yeah, in terms of protected species, if the committee were minded to approve it, we could do. I think we've done something similar in the past, is to potentially delegate authority back to the authority, subject to the protected species report being done. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust quite helpfully sort of indicate what sort of survey it is, and I think, as far as I remember, it is something that can be done at any time of the year as well. So it would be a case that could be picked up if you were minded to approve it. That could still be subject to the protected species being done and the findings of such a report as well.
So just to clarify, that could be conditioned, could it, as part of
yeah, we would just say that we wouldn't, in theory, release the decision because they have to have the report prior to determination in case there is anything like mitigation or anything that needs to be done. So we'd probably say, subject that you do the protected species report and the findings of that, and Derbyshire Wildlife Trust looking at it, then that's the one we'd release the permission for it.
Thank you, Councillor Archer, for that helpful question. Councillor Burfoot.
Just a simple question, I think, Chair. I noticed in the correspondence received there's a mention of battery systems, but I can't find it in the report. So could you just explain where this battery would be in relation to the solar panels? And is there a battery?
Yeah, just to clarify, this isn't a listed building that we're dealing with, and normally battery storage would be internal, so the installation of the battery wouldn't require planning permission.
Okay, we move into debate now. We have a recommendation to refuse, which you can see in the report, for a number of reasons, two relating to impact on the conservation area and one relating to the ecological impact. So to start the debate, we need a proposal either to move the recommendation or an alternative recommendation, please. Councillor Murphy.
Chair, I would like to support this application, go against officer's recommendation. I do appreciate it's a conservation area and it's got a special designation. Had a similar sort of application in the Peak Park recently, and it was in Moniash, and I remember driving through that village numerous times and thinking, when I looked at the actual document and this application that was coming before us, I thought, oh no. But what I didn't realise, I'd driven through that village quite a few times and not realised there was solar panels in other areas of the village. And I thought, right, okay, they weren't that noticeable. The applicant, who was proposing the Monie Ash one, he was looking at low-profile solar panels. They were matte finished, and we came to the decision to approve it. So, we talk about, green policies, energy efficiency, reducing carbon footprints and whatever. And I think this site is actually, it's not so obvious. The one in Monie was so obvious, it was in the sort of high street and whatever. There are only going to be certain aspects of this that are going to be seen from a car park. So I'm of a mind to support this application.
I'll second it, Chair. I was very impressed with the representations that have been presented tonight, and there's some, very, very powerful points made by the representatives, and I completely agree with you, Dermot.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded for approval, probably subject to the condition which Councillor Archer suggested. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Murphy makes an excellent point. If you look at the photographs in the report, the officer's report for this, and indeed more significantly, if you look in the design, access and heritage statement of the application, the sort of alien objects are actually not roofs, they're cars, they're TV aerials, the things that we actually tend to filter out when we're assessing the roofscape. That's what we've adapted to, and I think we have to adapt to solar panels in this way. We can see the heritage beyond the PE, I think, and I think we're going to learn to. Thank you.
Councillor Slack.
Beg your pardon. Thank you, Chair. Environment against climate change, which is the most important. In my opinion, climate change is really seriously important. Mankind, we're facing catastrophic heat waves coming, storms. We see it all over the world, and to just blindly say we'll go on carry out like we've always have done, we can't do that. We've got to go forward. And these solar panels, I went up to the top of the Dale and Greenhill, and I looked over it, and I jumped to see where the roof was. To be honest, you couldn't identify it because in between there's the old Co-op bakehouse, which is very tall, and it's you can't see it really. So it's not. It's Article 4 doesn't. It's Article 4, yes, but Article 4 was brought in many, many, many years ago, and it's once looking at again, and really now in this modern times, we've got to really, really now concentrate on solar panels and land wind turbines, which have been refused by us on many, many, many occasions. I've fought for a long time for land wind turbines, and it's been refused. But we've got to now take the blinkers off and work hard to bring to tackle climate change. And I think we all realise that, all of us. Yeah. So I'm sorry I'm going against officer's recommendation, but I agree with the mover and the seconder. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I think as members of the Planning Committee, we're here to make a judgment, aren't we, on this. The officers have put forward the case for the reasons for refusal. That doesn't mean that we have to accept those reasons for refusal. In my view, we're looking at considering the balance here between the benefits in terms of, renewable energy and to the environment, as the speakers have said so eloquently, against the protection of the conservation area. And I've come down on the side, on balance, that I have to give greater weight to this need to reduce our carbon emissions. I think Councillor Dobbs made a very good point when he said about adapting. There have been, I'm sure all round, but certainly in Matlock, we've had Gigaclear everywhere putting up wires, and people are, we don't want wires, we don't want wires. You go around the town and they're everywhere, you just haven't noticed them. And I think this is the same thing with these. They've moved on a lot since they were first brought out. I really don't think they're going to be any kind of intrusive problem. So, yeah, I'm not happy to go against officer recommendations, but I feel as though I've just got to.
Any further contributions? Gina, Chris, we've had a recommendation to approve, and you had a suggestion from Councillor Archer as to an appropriate condition to handle the ecological impact issue. Would you like to add a condition appropriate to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just listening to the debate on this, I think members, in coming to the motion on the table, just need to satisfy themselves that either they're satisfied there's no harm in this particular case, or they accept there is less than substantial harm, but the public benefits of the installation would outweigh that harm. So it's one or the other in terms of the reasons for going against officer recommendation. We've discussed it in detail, the reason for the Article 4 direction, and members are entitled to come to a different view on the level of harm in this particular case, or the level of public benefit to be derived. So I don't think it's an unsound reason to arrive at in this particular case. In terms of precedent, Councillor Archer mentioned precedent earlier on. This, I mean, it is a visible roof slope, and there are a number of Article 4 properties within Wirksworth. So we just need to bear in mind consistency of decision making, any future applications that may come forward in the Wirksworth area, particularly affecting Article 4 direction properties. In terms of conditions, what I'd suggest is that when these panels come to the end of their life, we look at removing them, perhaps within 3 months of no longer being required for microgeneration, to ensure the removal of redundant structures and to preserve the character of the building and this part of the conservation area. I think we just need to make sure as well that the appearance is suitable. I think the applicant proposes black panels with black perimeter frames in this particular case, so we'd want a condition to make sure that they were that particular type, so they're as recessive as they possibly can be on the roof slopes. And I think the recommendation is one of authority be delegated to the principal planning officer or development manager here to approve planning permission subject to those conditions, following receipt of an ecological assessment and confirmation from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust that either that's acceptable and there's no impacts on protected species, or that the impacts can be suitably mitigated.
Right, colleagues, we've had three, I think, very sensible suggestions from our development manager there. Firstly, a condition that when the panels come to the end of their useful life, which they will do, that they are removed within 3 months. Secondly, a condition relating to the colour of the panels. And thirdly, a delegation to the development manager in relation to the required ecological assessment. Would those conditions be acceptable to the mover and the seconder? Councillor?
I think Chris also mentioned that we need to clarify if we're saying there's no harm or if there is harm, but we believe the benefit outweighs the harm. Yeah, but I think we had to clarify that before we voted. Is that right? We had to. We're voting on the fact that we think there is harm, but we believe the benefit outweighs the harm. Or is that what you're asking? If we've got to clarify that before we vote, that's what I'm just checking, really.
I think it would be helpful in terms of the reasons for going against officer recommendation, because linking back to the precedent issue there, we just need to be satisfied that you may feel that because the roof slopes in this particular case aren't particularly prominent, that you feel actually there's no harm. And we might have a scenario in the future where you've got a more prominent roof slope and you think the harm would be, greater, and you're then in that less than substantial harm category and assessment.
I think there is some harm, because I think the roofscape is fantastic in it and it will alter it, but I think it's very minimal compared to the gain and the benefit of the solar panels. So, but I don't know whether that perhaps needs to be the mover and seconder that will need to clarify that before we vote.
So that's an additional note that the committee considers there is less than substantial harm to be caused by the installation. Well, the legislation uses the term less than substantial. That's
Yes.
Colleagues, let's not get carried away. So we had advice from our development manager that it'd be helpful to include that clause. Right, I think that was a very informed debate, so thank you for that. What I don't want to do is discourage our officers from making the case in the way they have done here, because it is a balanced judgment, and we do have to be very mindful as a committee of our responsibilities in respect of conservation areas and Wirksworth in particular. I think what's important for me is that these are in fact temporary additions to the structure, so the integrity of the structure itself is retained, and we've had a very helpful condition that when they do come to the end of their useful life, they will be removed, and if there is an alternative source of generation which results in even less than substantial harm, very minimal harm, if you like, Nick, then that would be the appropriate time to look at that. So on that basis, I too am happy to support the application. So all those in favour of the proposal to approve the application with the conditions as outlined by Chris Whitmore. Do we have anyone against? I don't think so. No, so that is carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Right, our second application this evening is in Darley Dale on Old Road, the Red House Stables, which many of us will know as the former Carriage Museum. We have on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Peter Burns, to speak. Mr. Burns. Councillor Whitehead, please. Mr. Burns, on behalf of, you're speaking on behalf of the applicant, and therefore you have 5 minutes to talk to us. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members, ladies and gentlemen. I've never been to a committee meeting before. I've not prepared anything to read out from, so I'm just going on the hoof. And really, I apologise, I'm going to be stating probably quite a few things I've already set out in the application. I'm a retired chartered building surveyor and a friend of Mr. Russell. He approached me back in May, June of 23 to advise him on his site, which he'd been in occupation of since round about December 2019. If I can first explain that this parcel of land which Mr. Russell bought was part of a much bigger complex, probably 3-4 times that size, which was a family-run business of the Red House Carriage and Horse Stables. At the time when I was looking around for a site, Mr. Russell's got a daughter with a thoroughbred mare requiring a paddock and stable and hayfeed barn to operate from. He's a semi-retired builder which is looking to retirement now. Over the years he's been, like myself, a collector of antiques, and as a building contractor doing a lot of landscape work, he comes across flagstones, etc. So he's amassed quite a collection which he held elsewhere in Birchover. When he saw this site being offered for sale, he had a look at it and saw that it would be ideal for his purposes. So he purchased round about December, January 2019. And before discussing with me, he simply occupied the site and worked on starting to upgrade it and tidy it up, etc. Now that site is, the section that Mr Russell's bought is really, it's a brownfield site, which no longer carries out the function that it did for many, many decades. Primarily it was a carriage, a carriage location where horses were trained and grooms and carriagemen were trained, some of which went on to work for the royal family. So that was the operation, which is gradually over the decades started to shrink. In part, the main dwelling in that area was the Red House itself, which was a large sort of turn-of-the-century gentleman's residence. That was sold off. Then on the site, at what time I don't know, a bungalow was built for members of the family. That was subsequently vacated and offered for sale and purchased by a private buyer. This is the next sort of stage in shrinking down that operation, and the site, which runs to about approaching half a hectare, was ideal for Mr Russell's purposes. So he's now accommodating his daughter's horse, a feed barn and a paddock for her to exercise the horse and train the horse in. Mr Russell has allowed as a favour to the previous owner, Mrs Caroline Dale Leach, he's allowed her to keep 2 of her working horses in the stables, which are now at retirement age. She's no longer operating in the way she did. She just simply takes out a cart probably once or twice a week for disabled people in the area to use. And the agreement is that if and when Mr Russell gets agreement to use the site more specifically for his own purposes, she would then vacate. So it is a brownfield site, and what Mr Russell has done, being a collector with a large range of products, he saw an ideal situation to locate in the carriage museum, which hasn't functioned as a carriage museum for many years now. So he's now occupied that with all his materials. That's block J on the block, the 200 scale block plan, and he's also moved his larger items into blocks A and B, which are old redundant carriage storage facilities. So his range of goods and stuff he's collected over the years are now stored in there. When he approached me in May 23 to ask me what he could do with the site, I advised him to apply to the planning authority for on a pre-planning inquiry, which I did for him in June, and we met on site with the planners, at which stage it became apparent to Mr Russell that he'd started to trade with his friends who were local.
Can you draw to a conclusion, please?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Okay, to cut it short, he's now wanting to apply so that he can withdraw from his building works and look more at as a small-scale operation selling antiques on that site. We don't anticipate any traffic generation above what's there now and what was ever there at the maximum time when the carriage was visited by the public and school trips, etc. So we're asking the committee to vote to support it. Say no more.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Burns.
Thank you.
For a first attempt, that was very good. Thank you. Right, we have, before again we hear from Gina, we have a late submission, some information from the agent on the papers circulated. If you'd like to take again a minute or two to have a look at those. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Gina again now. I shall tell you this is a change of use application, the part retrospective change of use, and Gina will explain to which parts of the Red House Stables applies to and what the change of use entails. Gina.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to Red House Stables is a fairly extensive site. This particular application relates to the north part of the site. So on the plan showing, it's a couple of buildings and the yard at the start. So there was an element of it already being operated as a sales and storage for the sales of antiques and salvage, which the applicant then applied for. Previously to this, it was an equestrian use site, but also it had the carriage museum and it offered carriage rides as part of that as well. So there was already a commercial element to the site prior to it being used for its current use. So based on its sort of location and what it's offering in terms of potential tourism opportunity as well, because it's a sale of antiques and salvage, it's quite close to Darley Dale, although it's outside of the settlement framework, it's quite close in terms of being perhaps about a 10-minute walk from Darley Dale itself. We felt that this new use, was an appropriate use for the site, and it was just a case that in terms of what we've done is to look at the potential impact because it was already in existence, is to see how we could look at it in terms of how it operates on impacting neighbours. So we've just recommended some conditions in terms of the hours of operation, hours of delivery, and how the salvaging things can be stored to make sure there's not any visual, and hopefully there shouldn't be any visual impact or impact on the neighbours as well. So we think in terms of what it's been used for, it is what we consider appropriate for the site, and we've just put conditions on that I think that will ensure that the amenity of the neighbours and the visual amenity of the area will be preserved alongside the use as well. So a recommendation of approval subject to conditions relating to operating hours, delivery hours, and how things are kept on site, and also what use is on the site has been put on as well. So a recommendation of approval has been made to those conditions.
Thank you, Gina. That was very clear and helpful. Questions from members, please. Councillor Burton.
Chair, for those of us that were unable to be present at the site visits yesterday, can you just convey to us what the feeling or what the view of the Darley Dale Town Council representative, is there anything you can impart? What were the comments?
They have come back to me today to say that I think it really clarified them going to site yesterday, so they didn't want to come to the meeting any longer. So I think there was a helpful amount of clarification through the site visit yesterday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Councillor Maelstrom.
Thank you. I was just wondering what the reason was for restricting the trading hours to 5 hours a day, which does seem quite a short trading day.
Those are the hours that they put forward to us. So I think it's just because it's a bit of a hobby, sort of. It sounds like a semi-retirement. It's just, potentially we look at opening hours, and if they did want longer than that, we would consider that. But I think they've just put them forward, and we think that's quite appropriate for the site. So all I've sort of done is look at the deliveries in terms of the hours of operation, I don't think in terms of neighbour amenity and things it would be too much of an issue. So we've just tried to control the deliveries to site, but that's sort of what they've put forward to us. So we thought, well, I think that would be fine.
No further questions. We'll move into debate then. We have a recommendation from our officers to approve this application.
Chairman, as ward member, I do thank the case officer for a very good report, very detailed report. I think it's utterly reasonable what is being applied for here, so I will move the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Slack, did you want to? The contributions from the floor. Councillor Dobbs. that right?
Just to say that there's a lot of history involved with this, just briefly, because the Christmas time, years and years ago, the carriages used to come down into Matlock and Santa, and it was quite a novelty when years and years ago, but same as the gentleman said, things have declined, the carriage museum, so yeah, I'm fully supportive of it.
It's been moved and seconded. Can we have all those in favour of the motion to approve? Anybody against? No, I don't think so. No abstentions. So that was approved unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Now moving to the other end of the district, down to Longford, where we have a proposal to erect 6 commercial industrial units of various types, research and development and storage and distribution. We have the applicant with us this evening, and his partner, in fact, to speak in favour of the application, Mr. Karminki. You have 5 minutes then.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity to speak this evening. We're in front of this committee today mainly due to concerns about increased traffic flow to Thurbiston Lane in the event of our planning application being granted. We understand the importance of keeping disruption to a minimum. My parents currently live at the property and have done so for over 50 years. My mum walks up and down the road multiple times a day, and I often use a push bike to exercise my dog. I also hope to one day move my own family and 2 young boys onto the property, so avoiding disruption was paramount in our decision making. We would like to take this opportunity to offer assurances that this is something we have considered strongly in our application. The commercial use at the property has been in situ for around 80 years, with my dad running it for over 50 of those since the early 70s. The location and permission to run our business already stands, and with the current economic climate, we are now at a turning point where changes must be made to generate more turnover and remain a viable business. The current permissions we have as a business owner would allow us to expand our current uses of haulage, sales and repairs of trucks and storage, but due to the significant increase in traffic that this would cause, we wanted to explore other avenues. This is why we would like to invest in the commercial units. Although this will be time-consuming and have a significant upfront cost, it would be more beneficial to the area in terms of traffic flow and to the local community by creating more jobs and prospects. Being granted permission for the units would ensure mainly employee traffic with the potential of a few deliveries as opposed to various large vehicles multiple times a day. There are currently 2 businesses within the same parish that have already been granted planning permission for a number of similar units. The outcome of this meeting will decide which direction our business takes, and we really hope to come to an agreement for the units based on these facts. I'd like to highlight that the Local Highway Authority has retracted their previous objection following the submission of the transport statement that was obtained through an independent company. This statement summarises what we are intending to do and uses relevant data to explain the outcome of each scenario. There have been no accidents on the lane or surrounding areas, and this is evidenced in the statement, which provides data for the past 5 years. As a result of this, the Highway Authority agrees that the best way forward for the area would be to invest in the industrial units, and this opinion has now been seconded by the planning officer. They state that with the Local Highway Authority assessment and the plan to relinquish some of our operators' licences, the increase in vehicle movements would not affect traffic or sustainability enough for a refusal decision to be upheld. In a letter dated the 10th of November 2023, the Parish Council wrote, quote, "We consider that the Local Highway Authority's response is seriously flawed," and, quote, "The Local Highway Authority clearly does not understand the road access to the site." I wanted to address these points and provide assurance to the Parish Council that the Highways Department did their due diligence before confirming their stance, and that all the recommendations have been based on facts taking in the best interests of the local area. We have received no objections from consultees apart from the Parish Council regarding this planning application. We have taken the traffic concerns from the Parish Council and neighbours very seriously, and we hope that the evidence we have collected to address these concerns will be considered as strongly as we have considered theirs, and that the planning permission for the units will be granted. To recap, the proposal would safeguard the existing long-established business, create jobs in the local area, and be more desirable in highway terms than the alternative option of intensifying the existing business use. I hope you will follow the advice of your professional officers and support the application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Carminke. Right, I'm going to ask Chris Whitmore to introduce the application and in particular to explain how it differs from the previous application which was refused. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Just draw members' attention to page 38 of the agenda, which sets out the planning history of this site. This application is essentially a resubmission of an earlier application which was refused for 5 reasons, and those 5 reasons are set out on page 38. There was concerns with the original application that there would be an intensification in the use of the site and the associated impacts on traffic in terms of increased vehicle movements to and from the site were considered to be prejudicial to highway safety. There was a lack of information in relation to the scheduled monuments. That has been addressed through the application documents that have been received with this application. You'll see the Development Control Archaeologist's comments on this application in now recommending a condition and raising no objections in terms of the impact on that heritage asset. There was also concerns about noise. The previous application included B2, which is a general industrial use. That's now omitted from this application, so we're dealing with research and development uses. So that's research and development of products and processes, so small laboratory, for example, or a modern or innovative industry such as robotics, something like that would fit within that research and development use, and it also includes storage and distribution use. The current application is accompanied by a transport statement, and that transport statement considers the relinquishment of a number of operators' licences on this particular site. Members who visited the site yesterday will have noted the scale of that existing operation. It is a significant operation currently. This application includes quite a significant part of that existing site. So this development, although it introduces some new commercial development, in terms of intensification of use of the site, it's not considered there would be any material increase in activity on site. We feel that the application in its revised form with the revised information that's been submitted has satisfactorily addressed all 5 reasons for refusal. I'm happy to take questions at this stage.
Thank you, Chris. Questions? Councillor Lees first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Chris, B8, storage and distribution, refers to storage inside and outside. I take it condition 6 addresses that situation, that there can't be no storage outside without permission. Is that correct?
Yes, there has been some correspondence between the local authority and the applicant's agent about this particular condition, because the application site area, if I just show you there, is quite significant. See there on the hatched purple annotation on the plan. That's the extent of the site area, and that condition would bite on that application site area there. So the area for haulage and repair of HGVs and their distribution and sale from site would be undertaken on a much smaller area of land.
Councillor Maelstrom.
Thank you. Yeah, the report refers to conditioning a biodiversity enhancement and management plan. Is that the same thing as a biodiversity net gain metric? Because it seems a little vague in talking about biodiversity enhancement rather than specific BNG that I think is now in force for a site of this size.
Yes, the mandatory requirement for 10% biodiversity net gain came into force after this application was submitted. So there is still a requirement to deliver a measurable biodiversity net gain on site. The baseline for this particular site, for those that visited it yesterday, is very low because it's almost entirely developed currently. So there's significant opportunity to enhance biodiversity on this particular site, hence the advice and the recommendations of Derbyshire Wildlife Trust in this particular case.
Sorry, does that mean that the new legislation doesn't apply to this application?
That's correct.
Further questions, colleagues? No, we'll move into debate then, and we have a recommendation for approval. Would anyone like to move that recommendation or an alternative? Councillor Whitehead.
I'm very happy to move it. Seems like a sensible kind of approach that the applicant's taking. Our officers are happy with it. There seems no controversy about why we should disagree. So I'm very happy to propose.
Okay, does anyone want to second that? Councillor Lees?
Yes, Chair, I'll second it on the understanding that, that obviously, as we saw yesterday, the roads are very narrow around that area, quite a long way off the main road. So if it reduces heavy goods from off those roads, reduces the traffic flow, I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dobbs.
I was going to offer to second, but I can certainly echo some of my colleagues' comments thus far. It strikes me as being a little bit of innovation to keep a company alive, and I can only applaud it. Thank you.
Any further contributions? Councillor Slack?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I echo Councillor Dobbs. Today, same as with farming, you've got to go into other areas to try and make a living and improve things. So I can understand it and I support it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, before we move to the vote, if I make a comment, our tunnels get a lot of criticism, as does the local highway authority, and I think it's really heartening to see the collaboration, the cooperation between three parties here to arrive at a very satisfactory outcome to the benefit of the Dales and to the benefit of this local enterprise. So well done, Chris and team, and well done, local highway authority. Right, all those in favour of the application, please show. I don't think we have anyone against, do we? No abstentions, so that is carried unanimously. Thank you again, colleagues. Right, our final application this evening is in Ashborne, on Derby Road in Ashborne. This is an outline planning application for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the associated buildings and the construction of a new care home with 74 bedrooms. We have Mr. Tony Asprey, the agent for the application, to speak in favour. Mr. Asprey, you, as agent, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Sorry, could you just turn your microphone on?
Ah, right. Sorry. The matters that I want to put before you tonight have already been essayed in a letter which your officers have seen before tonight. The applicant, I must say, feels that they've been bounced into the consideration of this application at this stage, and I'll make that clear why. And it's with some reluctance that we say actually that the committee report is materially defective and misleading because, firstly, the application documents list is inaccurate and it's incomplete, and it doesn't refer to the most up-to-date documents. And we say that, as a result, the author of this report will have failed to take into account all the material considerations that are up to date and must therefore be at risk of having misdirected themselves. Secondly, a key consultee, the Environmental Health Officer, who, despite a request by the applicant to engage with their expert noise and air quality consultants to address their rebuttal response to their comments, has declined to do so. and has also misinterpreted the submitted reports and wrongly criticised alleged environmental mitigation measures which are not in fact proposed or relied on by the applicant. For example, sealed non-opening windows. And we say indeed that these are not necessary, that proper engagement would have allowed these errors to have been corrected before the report was prepared. Those measures are not necessary because the applicant has demonstrated through authoritative technical assessments that accord with best practice that the alleged environmental constraints, noise and air quality, are not serious or compelling and will not materially detract from the amenity of the residents of the proposed care home. The potential adverse environmental impacts have been overstated and are given undue weight, therefore. And in this context, I would say that this is not a speculative application. It's an application supported by operators and with experience of this type of development, and a developer with experience of this type of development. We say the report and recommendation demonstrates an approach that is also inconsistent with recent relevant decisions. Thus, the alleged adverse environmental conditions did not prevent the granting of planning permission for residential development immediately opposite the application site on Turnpike Way, the Cameron Homes development. Furthermore, the allegedly pervasive local odour impact has not prevented the council allocating a major residential sustainable urban extension, HC2, C and D, immediately abutting the industrial estate and downwind of the odour sources. The report is also inconsistent in characterisation of the purported environmental threat posed by odour sources on the industrial estate. The applicant's evidence is that the odour levels are not such as to prevent residential development on the application site and are, in any event, variable in their intensity depending on weather conditions. But we also say that the council can't have its cake and eat it. If the odour impacts are so great as to absolutely prevent this type of development, then there must logically be a nuisance which is actionable through air quality legislation. Finally, the report fails to strike the planning balance properly, we say. The council clearly recognises the impact of an ageing population, resulting in a compelling need for accommodation excuse me, for the elderly and infirm, including care homes through policy HC11 of the adopted local plan. But there is a national and local crisis in the shortage of specialist accommodation for the elderly is undeniable, and the contribution the application proposal would make to meeting this urgent need should be at least a weighty, and in the applicant's view, indeed an overriding consideration, given the absence of demonstrable harm. But we say the report signally fails to strike this balance properly. So I finished, members, by saying that one of the measures of a civilised society is how we look after our old people. And there is an urgent need to look after old people, the elderly and the infirm. And you talked earlier about balance, and we say the balance has been wrongly struck here, and we invite you to conclude that the benefit of this development outweighs the harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asprey. I'm going to ask Chris Whitmore, when he introduces the application, to address the your point you make about significant issues of accuracy, but I'll let Chris respond to that. Now, colleagues, we have some additional correspondence on this application. You'll see on your papers. It's quite meaty, and I think it's perhaps unfortunate it has come as late correspondence. There's a letter from Heaton's on behalf of one of the occupiers of the industrial estate, and a letter on behalf of the applicant. So if we could take a few minutes to digest these two items of correspondence. Right, thank you, colleagues, for taking time to read that through. I'm going to ask Development Manager Chris Whitmore to introduce this item. Chris, if you could address initially the points raised by the agent, his contention that there are significant issues of accuracy in the office in the report. Thank you, Chris.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just addressing that point first, I think the reference from the previous speaker and the agent on this is that the case officer hasn't listed all of the documents and information that's pertinent to the assessment of this application in their officer's report. Officers are, however, satisfied that all of that information has been made available to the public and consultees, and full regard has been given to it. Therefore, we don't consider that any decision that we issue this evening would be unlawful in that respect. The reference to potential legal challenge being made, but my understanding is that there would be a right of appeal that would need to be exercised first. And again, all of that supporting information and plans would form part of the assessment of that appeal. Turning to the application before members this evening, the application is for a 74-bed care home. Members benefited from visiting the site yesterday to understand where this site sits in relation to existing residential and industrial development. You'll note from the plan on the presentation currently that the footprint of the building is extensive. It sits forward of the existing ribbon development of housing and small business premises that line this section of Derby Road. Officers have got a number of concerns with this application. You'll note from the officer's report itself there's concerns about noise and odour and the potential impacts that would have on the future occupants of this facility. There's also concerns about the design. We feel the scale, design and appearance of this building is not appropriate. We feel that it doesn't respond positive to the character, context and identity of this part of Ashbourne. We feel it's overdevelopment of the site. You'll note from the late representations that there's further concerns about the close proximity of this facility to a COMAR site. A COMAR site is it's control of major accident hazards site, and it's an upper tier site. The adjacent business is a dog food manufacturer which stores chemicals in sufficient quantities to be considered a hazard to the environment. Now, there are concerns that there are plans currently, you'll see in the late representation sheets that on the Health and Safety Executive's website, there's concerns that a plan is currently being developed by HSE and the local authority for how you deal with an emergency situation. And with this being a residential use and having vulnerable adults or children, whoever it may be, living in the facility, that presents quite a significant risk. The odour report that's been submitted with the application, I understand, I've read it this afternoon, I've had a look at it. It does indicate that the impacts will be negligible. But what we have to bear in mind here is that Moy Park is one of the substantial odour emitting facilities in the area. That's only currently operating at half of its capacity, with only the abattoir element currently operational. And we as an authority continue to receive complaints about odours from that particular site. It's interesting that on the days that the subjective assessment was carried out by the odour consultant, that on the last visit, the day before, we'd received a complaint about odour from that particular facility. It is regulated by the Environment Agency, and again, the Environment Agency, in commenting on the application, have raised concerns about complaints they receive about odours from that particular facility. So we're not happy with the application in terms of the scale of the development, the nature of the use, the impact on future residents in terms of noise and odour, the quality of their life and amenity when making use of the facility, and also the potential risks that a facility of this scale and nature could have in such close proximity to a hazardous substances site such as Trow Nutrition right on the boundary. Happy to take questions at this stage.
Thank you, Chris. Questions, please. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, could you comment on whether you have heard from Severn Trent Water? There was no response, according to the report. There's no response to this point in time.
No, we haven't received a comment from Severn Trent Water, but the proposal is for, in terms of foul discharge, we're looking at gosh, I need to get my words right. It's not septic tank, a package treatment plant on site. The sewer, the nearest available sewer connection is too far away for that to be practical, so it would be a bespoke foul drainage system on this particular site.
Right, if I can ask two parts then, which follow on from that. In your experience, is it unusual for a building of this size to have a package treatment plant?
I think in a town location like this, you'd expect some connection to the main sewer, but it's not something that we can insist on. A package treatment plant is an acceptable means of disposal of foul waste. If it can be demonstrated that a connection to the main sewer cannot be made, there'll be a permitting, from my knowledge, there'll be a permitting regime where they'd have to get approval from the Environment Agency to install that type of system.
Right, and my third question, in your experience, is 5 extra metres usually a reason given to have a package plant rather than connect to the foul sewer?
That will be a question, that will be raised at the sort of building regulation stage in terms of whether they've demonstrated that they cannot make that connection to the main sewer, because that would be the preference in terms of the drainage hierarchy.
Thank you.
Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions, Chris, if that's okay. The letter from Heaton seems to sort of back up most of the things that has been said in the officer's report, so that seems quite key. The bit I'm interested in, though, is the agent spoke about other residential properties that have been built nearby, and have we passed planning permission? And I just wonder whether you could just kind of describe that a little bit for us in terms of kind of why that's not set a precedent for this, or is it the close proximity to the hazardous or the potential hazard that is the key?
Yeah, so Moy Park on the plan that's in front of on the presentation currently. So Moy Park is to the east of the site. The development that the agency is referring to is to the west. You see those dots on that field; they represent new property points. So in terms of odour, the Cameron Homes development is slightly further away from that main odour emitting use. In terms of Trow Nutrition and the location of that facility, this application site is immediately adjacent. So I appreciate that the Cameron Homes site is close, but it's on the other side of the road, and a specific noise assessment was submitted with that application, which addressed potential noise impacts from the development.
Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, there's access into the industrial estate at the bottom side of the site there. Whose ownership is that in? Is it, with the lilac-y coloured bit there, is that a separate ownership, or is that part of the same ownership? There's a track there's a gateway that goes from the A52 right into the industrial estate. Whose ownership is that under? Because it looks like it's incorporated in this ownership.
I wouldn't be able to comment. That's a plan that the council's produced. If we go back to the site location plan, so that's the site location plan. So the red line represents the extent of land within the applicant's ownership.
Yeah, right. And when you talk about emergency situations, I've frequently in the past used that access to get water into the industrial estate when we've had incidents on that industrial estate. So I'm just curious as to whether that's owned by this property or it's a separate ownership. It doesn't really show clearly. It shows on this plan that it's on the ownership of this land, but I don't know.
We have to trust that the red line is representative of the applicant's land ownership. So if that includes that access, then that would fall within the ownership of the applicant.
Right. Thank you.
Chris, am I right in saying that if the applicant did own that land, they would be required to indicate on the application? Councillor Archer.
Thanks, Chair. I hope I'm right in this. I believe the applicant had requested potential deferment to get more time to get some more evidence together and stuff. If I'm correct, if I'm not correct in that, my apologies. If I am correct in that assumption, could you just explain why we decided not to give more time and not to defer this case?
The council's practice is only to negotiate relatively minor changes to applications to make what would otherwise be unacceptable acceptable. In this particular case, to address the 3 reasons of refusal in this particular case, we'd be looking at fairly substantial changes to the scale, the layout of development on site, and it's unclear as to whether any new application, new proposal could address our concerns in terms of the impact of odour and noise on the future users of this facility.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, in regards to infrastructure and so on, this is a big development, and obviously a treatment plant's going to be suggested. But I'm looking a bit further forward. If there was a big project with all this infrastructure, it'd have to be up to standard. So Severn Trent should be a consultee and give us information on this, shouldn't they?
They should. I mean, it does duplicate other regimes that exist. So the applicant has presented a drainage strategy to us, and what they've said is that the distance of the site from the sewer is such that it's impractical to deliver a connection. But they'd have to demonstrate that through the building regulations process. And there's also a permitting regime with the Environment Agency to agree anything other than a mains connection, a main sewer connection.
Any further questions? No, we're moving to debate, and we have a recommendation from our officers that the application is refused. Does anyone want to move that, or an alternative, please? Councillor Lees.
I'll move it, Chair, as per officers' recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Dobbs.
Happy to second that, Chair.
Any contributions from other colleagues on the recommendation? Councillor Dobbs, you wanting to speak?
Please, Chair. Thank you. I'm frankly horrified about what was proposed as to how to treat foul water. If you read in detail the MEC report, which comes with the application, there's some very strange statements, some very strange paragraphs, and as I suggested in my questioning, I do not understand why this option has been chosen, unless there's something that has been said by Severn Trent that we don't know. Because if you read carefully, they're going to discharge the mixture of surface water held in a suds, mixed with the output from the package plant, and to discharge it into the highly controversial, culverted sort of stream that comes under the airfield and becomes the stream which has caused all the problems in recent times in Ashborne. It basically comes out of a head wall in a 15-inch culvert as a rather grey, disgusting-looking trickle. Its exact origin somewhat unknown, and they're going to discharge into that. And I would challenge the assumption that there isn't a sewer. Actually, Cameron Homes have a foul sewer and a stormwater sewer, almost opposite this development. So there's something very strange here, which I find deeply unsatisfactory, and I'm very glad that hopefully we're going to refuse it as it stands. Thank you, Chair.
Further contributions? No, we have a motion to recommend, a motion to refuse, proposed and seconded. All those in favour of the proposal, please show. Is anyone against? Do we have any abstentions? No, that is unanimously refused. Thank you, colleagues. Right, move on to the next item, which is to note the, it's item 6, to note the progress on planning appeals. You'll see that these are either being processed or one has been withdrawn. Someone like to move that we note this? Thank you, Councillor Lees. Councillor Dobbs. All those in favour, please show. It's unanimous, I think. No one against? No. Thank you. Right. The additional item I referred to, colleagues, Tom has circulated a letter from the Planning Inspectorate dated 19th of February. This refers to an application, residential application at Wirksworth Road in Ashborne, which we refused. I think it was late last year. The applicant has now appealed, and you'll note from the letter that relatively unusually, the appeal is to be determined through a public local inquiry scheduled over 8 days in May. I'm going to ask Chris Whitmore to explain the implications of this, because if you recall, this was an application which the committee refused, contrary to the recommendation of officers. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Despite officers' best efforts to encourage the inspectorate to hear this matter via written reps or informal hearing, the appellant was very keen for the matter to be heard by public inquiry, and the inspector, unfortunately in this case, has agreed that a public inquiry would be an appropriate method of considering this particular appeal, primarily because of the various reasons for refusal and the need to test those reasons by the authority's experts under oath. I appreciate there's a couple of technical reasons for refusal, and we're going to need to, I think, appoint experts to help us with those. Officers are compromised to the extent that we'd recommended approval of this application, so we may need to consider again appointing a planning consultant or someone to help members. But I think it's important that to ensure that we've got the spirit of the resolution right, and that the members that put the motions on the table and seconded those have the opportunity to be able to present the council's case or be involved in the preparation of the council's case. I think Councillor Dobbs put the motion on the table and Councillor Archer seconded it. I appreciate, I mean, an 8-day public inquiry is an awfully long, amount of time, isn't it, to consider a planning application, but I think it's because of the different. So it's just if Councillor Dobbs or Councillor Archer, if any of them have got time to sort of commit to being involved in preparing the council's case, with I think we'd have to say as officers with help, because we can't expect you to to defend that application fully without having appropriate people there to help defend our case. From memory, there was a couple I think you can defend. Poor connectivity to the town, I think that could be easily defended by members. There's one on drainage where we probably need to get a drainage consultant involved. Well, I think we'd have to appoint our own specialist drainage consultant on that.
It was access as well.
Access,
it's
yeah.
a wider road going into a narrower lane.
So we might need to think about a transport consultant, a drainage consultant. The other things we'd probably defend as, between us, either whether it's officers or with officers' help and members, or a planning consultant.
Absolutely fine. Yeah, no. Just say when and we'll do what we can.
In terms of, in terms of the deadlines, we've got to prepare our statement by the 21st of March. I think I wanted to bring it to the meeting so we can at least get agreement from members that are happy to, defend our position, so we can get wheels in motion, ready to find people to help us and to present the best possible case we can to the inspectorate.
As the seconder, I am absolutely happy to defend our position, but I'm not going to tell my boss I'm going to miss 8 days of work for it. So that could be tricky. Am I going to be, a serious question, would I be expected to potentially be there for 8 days of this inquiry? How will this actually work in practice? Because I will need to be thinking about this in terms of my job.
They'll basically break it down into different areas. So you'd have probably a day just dealing with drainage, a day dealing with design. They'll break it down into the different reasons for refusal. If Councillor Dobbs takes a lead on it, he can just update you on.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Yeah.
Rather than both of you being involved.
Thanks, colleagues. Well, I'm obviously willing, more than willing to support colleagues in preparing the case. I think those, Laura.
Sorry, could you just confirm the date of the meeting when we discussed this application?
I think it's the 12th of December.
Kerry
Yeah,
France.
sorry, thanks. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to just confirm about the dates, for working. If you actually look at the dates, it's not consecutive. It's over 3 separate weeks. There's like 3 days one week, 3 days the next, and then a final day on the third week. Whether that makes any difference or not, but it's not eight consecutive days.
Some of them might be May half term. That might work.
For those of you who haven't been to a planning inquiry, they are public, so we are able to go and listen, not participate, but listen. It will either be held at Ashborne or here, I think.
If we lose, will we be liable for costs as well for this? Or will we, if we win, do we get the cost for this?
There is an interesting case, South Derbyshire, where similar scenario, but where the council has awarded substantial costs against them for unreasonable behaviour, and that's because reasons for refusal were introduced that couldn't be substantiated at appeal. So I think there's a couple of technical areas where we do need to get help to make sure we've got a defendable position. If we've got a defendable position, then we might be able to rebut any claim of unreasonable behaviour.
I think Chris is always clear when we overturn recommendations that we need to make sure reasons are reasonable. And I do think on this occasion they were reasonable, so I think they are defensible. So when we get nearer the time, I would encourage you to come along and have a look and see what happens, as long as you don't make faces at our colleagues. Right, thanks, colleagues. Now that we had 4 items on the agenda this evening, and that took us 2.5 hours. And the point I'm making is that even with four items, it took us 2.5 hours, and they were all unanimous decisions. So I think that does illustrate the length of time it takes to have a reasoned debate at planning committee. What was wrong, was it? Oh yes, an hour and a half. Sorry, an hour and 35 minutes. Yeah. Right, thank you, and have a safe journey home. Can you remember to fill in these wretched forms about interests?